I wonder if the other thing works. Guess I made it too good. Welcome to the Printer Prop Shop. I'm Michael. So I hope you liked that intro with all the effects and things like that. It was really fun to do. And if you notice really offhand, I used two hammers in that one. What I'm calling a dummy hammer. That was the one I kind of threw, but you saw me catch it in reverse. A little trick with cinema there. And then a hero hammer. Now I didn't start off like this. What it actually started off with was I wanted to just do a hammer for Thor Love and Thunder. But I couldn't find any kind of designs for it, and I didn't really want to design one. It was going to take a lot more time to do that. So I found one that I had in my files from Thingiverse. I'll go and link it below to the actual creator and thank them at the end, as I usually do. But when I did that one, I had started printing it, and it rattles a little bit because there's a piece in there that I kind of had to knock in, and I couldn't take everything apart. It's a long story. But anyway, I started working on this. I was about 2 days into it, and I started carving on it and had it all printed out and everything. And my guy Marco over at Mystery Makers decided to release his hammer, which is what I'm calling the hero hammer. So I didn't want to just kind of continue on this one, and when this was such a great file sitting there, he did such a great job on it, great work, great detail, everything. So I kind of conjured up that opening scene in my head and said, well, I need two hammers for it anyway, because I don't want to damage the hero one. So without further ado, here's how I did it. So let's jump right into it. So this is the original file that I had on hand still from one of my first prints, and I just wanted to go and start off carving it up, printing it out, and then I did use resin on this one to print out the actual spell, I guess, on the side of the hammer, as opposed to when I did it 3 or 4 years ago. And these ones took a little bit of time. I did print them on their kind of an angle, just because when I first started trying to figure it out. Now, I did figure this out a little bit better when I went to go do Mystery Maker's version, and I was able to print out all 8. But these ones I actually had to print off 2 at a time. And that was a little time consuming. It was about, I believe, 2 hours to print off 2 pieces on my AnyCubic. And then I did the top piece as well. And of course, this is all the dummy one. And this one, this one took a while, and it came out very solid. If I had to do it over again, I would go and slice this about in half. And the actual end cap, the pummel piece, printed off just fine. It did need a little bit of supports, but other than that, it was good. And this is just printing off some of the pummel there, just to give you a little FYI. I did go and use these reference photos to kind of get my idea of where I wanted to go with this. I know it's not exactly, but that's what they are. They're reference photos, and I haven't seen the movie, of course, yet, because it's not out yet. So this was that top of the hammer. I tried several times hoping that it would just shatter when I dropped it, but time and time again, it would withstand everything, and I finally just took a nail to it and a hammer and was able to shatter it. It really drives me nuts because I have dropped several lightsabers before, and they've just shattered by hitting a wooden floor, and for some odd reason this would not shatter just hitting concrete from about 4 foot drop, whereas my lightsabers would just shatter upon impact on even grass. I think it's happened to me. And then I didn't want sharp edges, I wanted kind of rounded edges. So I took all those pieces from the top piece there and just kind of rounded off the edges so I'd have more of a gap to it. And it worked out just fine for me. As you can see, it added a little bit more depth to it, I believe, and gave me something to paint on and shade a little bit. Now this is where I really kind of felt I could get a little bit creative on it. I pulled out my wood burner as I have in the past and just started smoothing out some stuff first. Before I started doing any kind of sanding, and this is actually how I seamed it together as well too, because it printed in 2 halves. I just took the wood burner and did it like I'd done helmets in the past. And I wanted to start with that top piece because that's kind of the break. If you look back on Ragnarok, I believe it is, yeah, Ragnarok, she's holding the hammer at that piece right there, and that's where it actually shatters. So that was my good reference point to start and where to go and send the brakes off. And then I took my wood burner and just started carving with it. And I knew I wanted to go and have it going through the little spell pieces as well. So I just started having fun and slicing through everything. So now this is the paint that I actually used on my original hammer. It's just forged hammered. You can pick it up Lowe's, Home Depot, anywhere like that, Ace Hardware, I believe, even Walmart. And it gives more of that hammered look. It goes on pretty thick. I will say you do have to put on a couple coats, and you have to be kind of careful, keep on moving around with it so it doesn't pool in a certain spot. But other than that, I love the way it comes out. Now I started off the handle with that leather paint that I have used in the past, and I just put on a really good base coat on that before I went to any kind of shading or anything with the silver for the actual notches on it. After my little end cap pieces there had printed off, I actually began starting to break them, and I noticed that the breaking wasn't coming off the way I wanted to, and dropping them wasn't working as usual. So I actually started with a file first and got a good clean kind of seam started with them. And then I actually took and just snapped them. And I will say these guys, you do have to sand them down a little bit to get them to fit. And at least I did. Maybe had I went and scaled them back before I printed them out, it would have been much easier. But I will say either scale them back or you're going to have to do some sanding. I started the pummel off with a black base coat, and I did this for both pieces. Now this pummel I actually did print off in resin. I should have printed it off in PLA. Well, I take that back. I did print it off in PLA first, but it just didn't print off very well. So that was kind of what I had to go with, and when I did my scene, I was just careful to make sure that it didn't land on that actual handle piece. After that, I ended up going back over with some black to add a little bit of shading to those little pieces that go up the handle, and then followed it up with my silver to go over them. And I did end up using about 3 coats of silver on this. Now after I had that paint dried that I had on there, that hammered paint, I went over the cracks with black and any kind of seams and things like that that you've seen me do in the past. Also went over the little spell pieces in black as well, just to kind of give them a dusting. I just didn't go very hard on them, and that kind of gave it more of a little depth look. Now the little handle at the end, again, as I've said in the past, I'm not much of a person that works with leather, so I decided to use foam like I'd seen Odin use in the past, and that was probably the best thing I could use. And for the little notches on the end that maybe you might see, I just used a little screw to add some little divot holes like they were threads, or like the thread holes, and that was easy enough. And to paint them, I just used some brown paint that I'd had. It's in that same line as that hammered paint, just to add a little bit of texture to it and to give it that nice leather brown. So you've heard me speak of mystery makers several times on here. Again, I can't give him enough props. Marco's an excellent designer. I'm going to show you a little bit of what I'm calling my hero hammer that he designed. He gives great detailed instructions. There was even a couple of different versions of this that you could do as far as lighting and things like that. I didn't choose to do the lighting, but you could put a dowel rod in the handle as well. You could do anything you needed to do with it. And I'm hoping to kind of revisit this later on, maybe in a year or so, and do the actual lighting in it. I think that's a pretty cool effect. So now it's on to the mystery makers. So what I did was, what I should have done in the past is scaled up the connecting parts. I left the handle at 100%, but anything that connected to it I actually scaled up to 103% and printed these connecting parts off on my Monoprice Mini that I got during Christmas. It was on sale really cheap, like $70 at Target. And something that I wish I'd known or tried out when I printed off the parts for the dummy one, instead of only printing 2 at a time, I was actually able to print, I think, about 9 of these at a time. I just had to turn them to about 15% as far as the angle goes and straighten them out as the build plate so that they weren't hanging off or anything like that. And then went ahead and added supports to them. And I tell you, I think the total print time on this was about 6 hours. So the other one, I believe, was like 2.5 hours per 2 pieces. So it would have saved me a lot more time. And I wish I would have done that at the time. And then the handle I printed out on my AnyCubic. And I actually sliced it up into 4 pieces first so that I could print it off. It would have been nice if I had the room to print off in 1 piece, but I just didn't have the room for it. And then printing off the 3 pieces, Marco did put in his instructions that you could print these without supports, and I should have tried that, but I was just too afraid to waste the plastic, so I went ahead and printed it off with supports, and maybe one day I'll try it without supports. Now Marco did make 3 different versions of the little spells that go around the caps available, and I printed off 2 of 2, and then like I printed off multiples of a couple different ones just so I'd have a couple different looks to it. Each time you kind of turn the hammer, it wouldn't be the exact same one. And I use super glue to adhere these. Like, unlike I did with the dummy one, I used construction adhesive. And that's just because I knew this was going to be a hero one and not tossed around. And then I actually assembled everything with super glue on this one, the gel Gorilla Glue, and then painted everything. And as you can tell, I used that hammered paint again, and the leather on the handle. Didn't have any issues at all. I will say, always make sure that you let that hammered paint dry before you attempt to actually set it on anything. I did have a little issue with setting it on the paper towel, and I didn't let it dry long enough, and it kind of left some imprints that I had to paint over again. But it wasn't a huge deal. It took all of them maybe another 20 minutes and some waiting. That was about it. I started my shading with it just as I did on the dummy one around all those rings. And since I had my black out, I ended up going all over all of those cracks that I had to kind of give a little bit more depth to it. And I didn't get to show that on the dummy one. My camera had actually filled up and I didn't realize it. But I added it on both, all of the black and things like that. But the one thing I didn't get to add on that was I started adding some blue to it that would give more of kind of a little lightning look, especially with the effects I was choosing. And that was just something that would add to the effects a little bit more. I did end up going through and hand painting the silver pieces on the handle on this one. The reason being is when I did try to spray them at first, and I was just getting way too much overspray. And I knew there was going to be maybe a couple close-ups on the handle that someone would see in my little video there. So the easiest way for me was just to go and do it hand painting, and it came out great, as you can see. Just a little bit more time consuming is all. So guys, that's how I did it. Got 2 hammers, 1 dummy, 1 hero. This one I did put in more work on, not gonna lie. And it's not for any reason of saying this file is better than this file or anything like that. Marco did do an excellent job on this one. However, this one I've actually made before. If you look over my right shoulder here, you can kind of see the handle. That was one of my first prints, and that's been about 3 or 4 years ago. And so I had already made this file, I just hadn't damaged it like I did damage this one. But if you're gonna do a hero and a dummy, excellent way to do it. You can tell that I use different materials as far as keeping it together on each one, and that's because, like, if you use super glue like I did on this one and resin for the handle, it's more apt to break once it's impacted, and resin will shatter once it hits something hard. Most of the time, as you can see, I had a little problem shattering the top piece here. Finally I had to do it with a hammer. But super glue as well will really hold resin, and it'll just make that piece shatter even more, and it won't break at the actual seam. Construction adhesive, on the other hand, if you actually drop it or something like that, construction adhesive usually separates at the seam and is plastic, so it's less likely to shatter. So that's how I did it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video today. I know it's a little bit longer than usual. Hope you have a great day, and go make some hammers. Go make a short film. Go make whatever. Just do something. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.